takes a shape of its own. Whether it's understanding history, or understanding the ideology itself, the doctrine itself, the teachings, or elements of it, or understanding the manifesto of whatever the ideology is. And presumably a manifesto of each faith is its holy book that contains the teachings of that faith. صلوا على محمد وآله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. And so in Islam too, Islam is a perfect faith that has been interpreted by people, and that's why we have many interpretations of Islam. We have many sects, but even within the sects, we have many different ways of understanding. We have in Shia Islam we have a lot of marjas, and they differ in khums, they differ in some elements of salah, they differ in in a lot of different things. That's because we're human. The way we understand, the way we perceive things, is ruled and will always be ruled, always be driven by our human instincts and our human growth, our environment, our food, our culture, our experiences will shape whatever faith, whatever understanding that we have. And amongst that also is the understanding of some certain concepts within the faith, some certain elements, for instance, within the Quran. To give you an example. Somebody in the beginning, the way we took our Islam from people before, whether the Imams alayhimu salatu wasalam, or for the Sunnis from the companions and their followers, is that somebody had an understanding, an early understanding of something, and that becomes carried forward. And it morphs into its own way or ways. Take, for example, the notion that somebody who fornicates and that they're married, that they should be stoned. Okay, where did that understanding come from? And you often hear from many people that the Prophet never did that. There were people who fornicated around his time, and he never did that. Why didn't he? Some people say, well, he never had a government where he could enforce the law. And some people say because it's not in the Quran. Because when you read the Quran, it doesn't say anything about stoning. Right? So that debate by itself becomes law, either this law or this law for people who come in future generations. The same thing about the laws pertaining to apostasy, ridda, vast differences in understanding between what the Sunni schools all concur should happen, and between the Shias who have a lot of little nuances and details on how that could happen, what the punishment is there. And the Shia scholars in many places say that there is no place for punishment. But I don't want to get into the details here because we only have half an hour. So that early understanding sticks with people. The Sunnis say, anybody who is a Muslim and changes their mind and becomes a non-Muslim, you kill him. There is no debate about that. And they take that from the actions of the second Caliph Umar, who did that. Wow, the Prophet didn't do that, neither did Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr actually killed a lot of people because they refused to give him zakah, which was the tax at the time. But if people said, I don't want to become a Muslim anymore, he didn't treat them the same way. So that becomes law for future generations. Divorce is another quick example where during the time of Abu Bakr, divorce laws were identical to Shia laws. But Umar said, I see that you guys, he's talking about the men, you become angry and you divorce your wife. And sometimes because these men used to say, I divorce you 3 times, which is completely invalid in Islam. But Umar said, because you guys do it, I'm going to teach you a lesson. From now on, when somebody says that, your wife is divorced 3 times. In Islam, really, this has no place at all. And when you read the Quran, it doesn't have any place either. But it became law, and it became law that actually changed many lives until this day. Anyway, so one of those concepts is the concept of Ahlul Bayt. And I really would like you to be patient with trying to understand my thinking around this. So the concept of Ahlul Bayt, because we are Muslims, most Muslims, if not all Muslims, understand some degree of Arabic. So if you talk to somebody in Farsi in Iran and say what's Ahl, they'd have a concept of that, Ahli man, right, brother? And in Turkey they'd have the same thing. In Urdu it's the same thing. I don't know other languages, but at least in these languages I can hear people say the word and it means something in their minds. Now if we strip culture out of this and try to understand what Ahl and Al-Bayt really together mean, we come up with a new understanding. Because the way it's understood to us was a debate around, were the wives of the Prophet part of Ahl al-Bayt? So it comes to our minds immediately, Ahl al-Bayt of whom? Because we have Ahl al-Bayt, right? All of us, we have a Bayt and we have Ahl al-Bayt at home. However, that's defined. And by the way, the nuances are amazing that between Iraq and Jordan, which have very similar cultures, the understanding is totally different. And as I understand it, in Iraq, when I ask an Iraqi brother, how was your Ahl? Who am I referring to, Sayyid? Wife. Your wife. While in Jordan, we say, how's your Ahl? You're asking about the wife and the children and the parents and the cousins and everybody else. And I've saw it in the faces of many Iraqi brothers at first encounters and they say, Sallam ala ahlak. Give my salam to your Ahl. They look at me like, who are you to send your salam to my wife? But in Jordan, that is actually impolite if you don't say that. Because it means something totally different. While the words in Arabic are the same. And if you look at the Quran, and so the reason that's what comes to our mind when we think about Ahl al-Bayt, who is the debate about? It comes around family structure. But if you look at the Quran, we find that it actually goes beyond that. For instance, Musa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Musa. When Musa said to Ahli, إِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِأَهْلِ إِنِّي أَنَسْتُ نَارًا. When Musa said to Ahli, and in this case, history and interpretations tell us that Musa talked to his wife. And he said, I saw a light. So in this case, it means wife. Agrees with the Iraqis. In other places, in other times, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Nuh and Lut, for instance. Where Allah tells Nuh, take from Ahlak into the ship, and Lut, take Ahlak with you. Illa mra'atak. And who were the Ahl of Lut in this case? They were his daughters. His wife actually was excluded. So in this case, Ahl meant family. And in other times, where the word Ahl is used in the Quran, it refers to the people of a town, Ahl al-Qura. Ahla hadihi al-Qarya, the people of the towns, or the people of this town. Where Allah talks about the people of Mecca, or any other town. Or when the Pharaoh said to Musa and Aaron, he said, you're trying to corrupt Ahla hadihi al-Qarya, the people of this town, meaning Egypt, which is a big country back then, still is. So we cannot say, in the case of Ahl, we cannot apply it to Iraqi or Jordanian, or Jordanian litmus test, right? We have to apply the linguistic application to it, the pure linguistic application that is stripped off of all culture. But then we find another usage of the word Ahl in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he tells us about the story of the angels coming to Ibrahim alayhi salam, and his wife Sarah was there, and she was old, and Ibrahim alayhi salam were old, and the Malaika tell Sarah that she's going to have a baby, and she says, how could I have a baby? I'm old, and my husband is even older. And the Malaika say, do not be surprised by the will of Allah. And then they tell her that the blessings and mercy are upon you, Ahl al-Bayt. Upon you, Ahl al-Bayt. Who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about here? When we look at the word Ahl in the Quran, it has different applications based on the situation. So we understood from the story of Musa, from history, that it was his wife that he was talking about, and became the tafsir of the Quran, the interpretation of the Quran. When it's talking about the Qawm Lut or the Qawm Nuh, we understand that it was more than wife. In fact, sometimes it didn't include wives. The word Ahl. Sometimes the Quran, we understood that it's talking about the whole town, a whole country, as in Egypt. Ahl.
But sometimes it's more specific than that. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Ahlul Bayt, so in other words, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Ahli Baytin yakfuluna about Musa alayhi salam, the people, Ahl Bayt, household, who will take care of Musa alayhi salam. There is no definition of Al-Bayt here, right? But when the word Al-Bayt occurs in the Quran, it is always in reference to a very defined and very specific Bayt. That's always preceded by Al-Bayt. Look at the ayat in the Quran. وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ. When Ibrahim resurrects the foundations of the house, which tells us that the house existed before Ibrahim, right? Because it was well defined. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He made this bayt, He specifically had al-bayt, safety and security for mankind. Or when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when you make hajj to al-bayt, always there is a very specific reference to al-bayt. It's a very well-defined bayt. It's a big subject. But in every instance where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about al-bayt, it's about al-bayt al-haram, Kaaba. Specifically Kaaba, the house that Ibrahim alayhi salam rebuilt. There is one reference in the Quran to al-bayt al-ma'mur, al-bayt al-ma'mur, a very well-defined house that is always alive. Ma'mur is always attended, right? And so some scholars say it's a house of worship that Allah built for the Malaika in the fifth heaven, where the Malaika make tawaf around it, just like Kaaba, right on top of Kaaba in the fifth heaven. Some scholars say no, it is actually Kaaba itself. But either way you look at it, if it's not al-Bayt al-Ma'mur, so let's exclude that because it says al-Ma'mur, so it gives it a further definition. But in other ayat of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about al-Bayt as being al-Bayt al-Haram. Now, there are two ayahs that talk about Ahlul Bayt in the Quran, and one is the one that we cited about Ibrahim alayhi salam and Sarah alayhi salam, the mother of Ishaq. And there is another ayah which is in Ahzab 33 where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ, that Allah wishes to purify you Ahl al-Bayt. Ahl al-Bayt. What Bayt is Allah referring to here? So what comes to our mind is, well, it must be the house of the Prophet. Right? While if we look at the verses in the Quran, there is really no evidence of that. That in fact, when Allah talks about Ahl al-Bayt, Allah is talking about the people who belong to Kaaba. Who? The ones who are purified by Allah. Because we are followers of the people who belong to Kaaba. But the ones who Allah chose to be in charge of Kaaba are the ones who Allah refers to in these two ayat as Ahlul Bayt. So, again, I should have given an hour to this lecture, but you'll get the gist of it. That when Allah talked to Sarah and said, the blessings and mercy of Allah be upon you, Ahlul Bayt, He wasn't talking to the people who were there, Ibrahim alayhi salam and the wife and servants, or whoever was there. Rather, He was talking about them, Ahlul Bayt of Kaaba. And the same thing, this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could, and I want to tell you this is an interpretation, could be talking about the Prophet, Imam Ali, Ahlul Kisa, basically at that time, and the followers that Allah chooses to be on the same path of Ahlul Kisa, who are the 12 Imams, alayhi salam, or in this case would be 9 Imams, right, in addition, that those are Ahlul Bayt, and they are the Ahlul Bayt of Al-Bayt al-Haram, the holy sanctuary, not Ahlul Bayt of the household of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, mind you that the household of Kaaba during the time of the Prophet is the Prophet, Imam Ali, and Ashab al-Kisa, people of the cloak. They happen to be the household of the Prophet. So they happen to be Ahlul Bayt of Rasulullah. But the grander title for them is really Ahlul Bayt of Baytullah al-Haram. Am I losing you, or is this making sense?
No.
Say, you're a scholar, is this making sense?
Yeah.
And so, so this interpretation changes a lot of things. There is no more discussion about, our wives of the Prophet, do they belong to this Ahlul Bayt? Clearly the Prophet said no. He made that very clear that Salama was not part of them. No other wife is part of them. He said Salama was great. But the people of Ahlul Bayt were very well defined, alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, as the Prophet and the Imams and Fatimah al-Zahra alayhi salam. So who are Ahlul Bayt? Throughout history, from this, we interpret, from the interpretation that we get is that it's Ibrahim alayhi salam and his children, and he included Sarah in this case, and from anybody who belonged to that lineage of Imams and prophets from Ibrahim alayhi salam who belonged to Kaaba. So let me explain this further to you. So Musa alayhi salam is not from Ahlul Bayt, because Musa alayhi salam, his Qibla was where? Where was it?
Jerusalem.
Well, he had two Qiblas. First he had his house and Harun's house as their Qibla in Egypt, but then they changed it to Jerusalem, right? That's what the Quran tells us. Isa alayhi salam, his Qibla was Jerusalem. Sulaiman, Dawood, there were many prophets who were great prophets, but they don't belong to this category of Ahlul Bayt. So who were Ahlul Bayt? They were Ibrahim alayhi salam, certain prophets and messengers and Imams who came from him, all the way until Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the 12 Imams. Now this idea of Ahlul Bayt, this understanding of Ahlul Bayt, was first really, kind of clarified by Sayyid Tijani. He says that people misunderstood what Ahlul Bayt here is. The concept, the conceptual Ahlul Bayt. They're the people who are ma'asumeen, who are in charge of upkeeping Baytullah al-Haram. It belongs to them. It is the physical Qibla and they are the spiritual Qibla. So from Ahlul Bayt, this very specific Quranic definition in this case, you can only be Ahlul Bayt if you're ma'asum. And that your destiny and the destiny of Bayt al-Haram are tied together by order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as such, inshallah, maybe we can try to speak more about this and explain it a little more, because it's a really intriguing way of understanding the Quran and it makes sense to me. I'm not saying I'm right. I read what Sayyid Tijani said and I read what other scholars said about what he said, and it really linguistically makes sense to me. And so when وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. When we look at Fatimah al-Zahra alayhi salam, we gather وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله. We gather that clearly she was part of Ahlul Bayt. Why? Because the Prophet said, defined that they are Ahlul Bayt. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله. So Fatimah alayhi salam was from Ahlul Bayt, and as such she should be ma'asum. I've heard some scholars say that what's the wisdom of Fatimah al-Zahra alayhi salam being ma'asum, therefore she's not ma'asum. Scholars that I love and respect, I disagree with them. Because first of all, we don't understand the wisdom behind Allah's rulings on our own. We don't. Right? What is the wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a prophet, a prophet, who were there just for part day, seriously, for 2-3 hours before they killed? What's the wisdom behind that? I've heard some people say we have imams who only lived for a couple of years, or very short lives. Many people do. Not many people realize how short the lives of our imams were. Miraculously, actually, if you really want to be astonished, read the debates, the writings and the sayings of our imams, alayhim salam, and then realize how old, how young they were when they said what they said. Imam Rida alayhi salam in his ihtijaj, with his debates with people of all faiths and non-faiths, atheists, and people of every religion, and he prevailed every single time. It's astonishing how knowledgeable he was. And then we forget that he was 21 years old when he did this. Or sometimes actually many of the Imams entered into debates that are, they boggle the mind, and they were teenagers. Of course, for us Shias, we get this because it's from Allah. وَآتَيْنَاهُ الْحُكْمَ صَبِيًّا. We give him wisdom as a young man. Allah says in the Quran about prophets, right? And so if he gives it to prophets, he gives it to Imams. That wisdom. So we get that. But we don't always get why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a prophet for a couple of hours. There are prophets who were sent as prophets that never encountered people. Why? Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make Khidr alayhi salam live for thousands of years? Why does Allah take Isa alayhi salam up to heaven for thousands of years? Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send a prophet or an imam for a couple of years? We don't understand the wisdom behind this. We trust that Allah has absolute wisdom and we accept that. That's one thing. And the second thing is, Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam was the only woman who was the daughter of a person of Ahlul Bayt, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. She was the wife of an imam. She was the mother of imams. She was the grandmother of imams. Ma'sumin, all of them ma'sumin. So her influence on their upbringing and her presence in that environment would give her at least practical infallibility. Although the Quran makes it clear that she has infallibility that is given to her by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we hear people saying, how could a person attack Fatima al-Zahra? And they bring a lot of questions like, why didn't Imam Ali alayhi salam defend her? I really researched this in depth and I wrote a book about it, alhamdulillah. And I found that question is only asked by people who really haven't studied history carefully. A very simple answer to this. Imam Ali alayhi salam was told, like Harun alayhi salam was told, that these things will happen. Ali, the Prophet told him, Ali, don't rise up. If you rise up, it's the end of Islam. No matter what happens, just don't rise up. It's the end of Islam. Like Harun alayhi salam, the golden calf right in front of him, he tried to persuade him not to, as Imam alayhi salam tried with words, but they didn't listen to him. So Imam alayhi salam was ordered not to. And then a question I heard from my Sunni environment was, how could a valiant Arab man do this to a woman? There's no way, a valiant man like Umar ibn Khattab would do this to a woman. Well, they forgot that this man is the one who killed his daughter alive. He took his daughter, she was 10 years old, her mother had taken her and hid her somewhere, with her family. And she said, well, she's 10 years old now, I'm going to bring her back, he's going to love her, she's his daughter. He was enraged when he found out about it. And what he did is that he took her out to the desert. He snuck her out to the desert to bury her alive. 10 years old, imagine. And he started digging the grave in the sand with his hands. And as he's digging the sand out, the sand came into his beard, and she cleaned up his beard because she didn't know what he was doing. And yet he buried her alive. This is the man that people are surprised to hear that he would do such a thing to Fatima al-Zahra. Now there are other factors I don't want to bring up here because they're inflammatory. But logically, if somebody who is willing to do that to his own daughter, why wouldn't he do it to anybody else? That was his nature, that he would do this. So there is no question. There is absolutely no question that Umar attacked the house of Fatima alayhi salam and threatened to burn her house. Now this is another matter. Some people say her house was burnt. That's not what I find in history. The thing that I find in history, in Sunni history, 100%, is that he brought the firewood and put it by the door and threatened to burn the house down. There's There's no question about that. But I do question the notion that he actually burned the house. Why? It's because they attacked the house. Fatima alayhi salam, stop there and think for a minute. Fatima alayhi salam died a very short period of time after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She was young, she was 18. How did she die? Just think, just keep that question mark in your mind. How did she die? Let's say that none of this stuff, let's say that you don't know anything about the history of Islam, and you're new to Islam, and somebody says, the daughter of the Prophet died shortly after he died, and she was 18 years old. What would come to your mind? Well, she died of disease, or she was murdered, right? She was young. There is nothing in history that tells us that she died of disease. There is every bit of history that tells us she died as a result of an injury. That's a big question mark if you don't know anything about history. Ask yourself this question. And further, inshallah, I'll wrap it up too. And further, where is Fatima buried? Alayhi salam? Where is she buried? That's a question. Why did Fatima alayhi salam insist? Remember, she was one of the Ma'asumeen. She was one of the infallibles. She was one of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. She was chosen by Allah in a very specific role that, brothers and sisters, Fatima is mentioned in the Torah, in the Injil, and of course mentioned in the Quran, and we know who she is. Why did she insist that she would be buried in a hidden spot? The Prophet said, bury me here, and everybody knew. Right? Imam Hassan alayhi salam said, bury me next to the Prophet, and they said no. And they actually hit his coffin with arrows until it became like a porcupine. So they wanted to be known where they were buried. Right? The Imams alayhi salam all wanted to be known where they would be buried. Abu Dhar did the same thing. He said, bury me here. And we have a lot of stories like this. Fatima alayhi salam said, hide my burial place. There's only one reason behind that. And that Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam wanted to awaken our conscience forever with that question. Where is she? Why was she hidden? Why did she refuse to allow Abu Bakr and Umar to attend? Or many of the other Sahaba who stood with them. Any Sahabi and any woman Sahabi who stood with Abu Bakr and Umar, Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam prevented them from participating in her funeral or knowing where she was buried. She was taking a political stance, clearly, but she was taking a stance for haqq versus batil. And if we knew, if we said, oh yeah, she was buried at this place, and Abu Bakr and Umar went and visited her grave, that would be used again. Well, Abu Bakr and Umar went and visited her grave and cried in her grave. But no, she refused. Until this day, by the way, and I hear some brothers and sisters say she's buried in Baqiyah. Really, nobody knows where she was buried. Deliberately, so that question remains until the coming of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, who will point at her grave. That's deliberate. That's a lesson to us by Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, and how to stick to a political stance, and how to stick to a principle, and never deviate from that principle. I humbly tell you, brothers and sisters, that in my research, and I spent a lot of time studying Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, because Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam is really the foundation of everything else. And there is just absolutely no question in my mind she was killed. There's no question in my mind she was injured. There's no question in my mind that her house was threatened with being burned down with a fire. And that's Fatima that we will never forget. Because of what happened to Fatima, say, how much time do we have?
Right.
Yeah. Because what happened to Fatima, they broke the rib of Fatima. Because of that, they were able to have the tenacity or the audacity to break the ribs of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, to kill every single one of the Imams alayhim salam, the descendants of Fatima, and to have the intention of killing the last Imam alayhi salam, the descendant of Fatima alayhi salam. Not only this, oftentimes we forget, brothers and sisters, that they didn't only kill the imams. They killed many, many scholars, many descendants of Fatima al-Zahra. If you go and read about the greatest philosophers of Islam, the greatest Irfanis, mystics of Islam, the greatest chemists in Islam, the vast majority were absolutely killed in gruesome ways. I'll give you two very quick examples. One was Hallaj. Hallaj was a Sufi scholar. And we Shias, have a neutral perspective towards him. Hallaj was in Iraq. And of course, the Sunni establishment, I'm sorry to be so blunt about it, they didn't like him. So they kept going to the king, and the king at the time of Hallaj, where Hallaj was executed, was a teenager. So they kept going to the king and saying, this guy is a troublemaker, and this and that, and he says he's Allah and all that, and these guys read their writings, they don't say that. They would say things like, I'm the manifestations of Allah's power. I'm the manifestation of Allah's power. Well, it's true. We are a manifestation of Allah's power to create. But these guys are nomads who just don't get this. So they say, oh my God, this guy is a heretic. And so they were holding a court for Hallaj. They were trying to deal with philosophy, and they have no idea how to deal with philosophy. Then somebody stood up in court and said, I know how to get this guy on the cross, because they killed him on the cross. They said, how? They said, let's look at his writings before. They looked at his writings, and at one point, Hallaj said, Ali alayhi salam. They said, see, he said alayhi salam, he's a Shia. That's it, done. They put him on a cross, and they cut off his arms the first night, and they waited, and it's a gruesome death. They actually took some of his flesh and cooked it right in front of him while he was still alive. Why do they do that? I don't get it. It's like they're mad at Allah, mad at knowledge, mad at Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, because Hallaj purports to be from the descendants of Ahlul Bayt. I don't believe that he was. The other one was one of the greatest scholars, not only of Islam, but of humanity. Somebody who changed the trajectory of philosophy and Irfan forever. That's Shahrawardi, or Sahrawardi as you call him in English. Sahrawardi developed a whole new of looking at existence that's called the Madrasa al-Ishraqiyya, or the illumination school of illumination. I don't want to get into it. The guy was 35 years old when he had published 50 books in Arabic, and according to some 35 books in Farsi about philosophy. 85 books at the age of 35. I mean, think of somebody who's 35 now. And so he didn't find the knowledge that he wanted in Iran, because at the time Iran was still, under actually extremist Sunni rule, not just, commonplace Sunni rule. So he started traveling, he went to Turkey, he met with the Seljuks, they respected him, but they didn't have schools there, so he traveled to Aleppo, Halab. And when he got there, he met with the King Baha'u'ddin. King Baha'u'ddin was the son of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, Saladin. So Sahrawardi didn't really care about his shape and his shaving, or he just was so lost in the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you read his books, they're very difficult to read, even for somebody who studied. You're mesmerized by what he writes. You're mesmerized by his poetry, by how beautiful and how amazing was his ability to take the philosophy of all philosophers, and the philosophers before him, like Ibn Sina, and turn it upside down. And so somebody says, you have to meet the king, and he says, I am not a king kind of guy. Leave me alone. They kept after him, he says, okay, I'll meet him. So he goes, and the king asked him some questions, and the king was really impressed by his knowledge. And now that the king is impressed by his knowledge, of course, the Sunni scholars who were there, who were allies of Salahuddin, didn't like that. So they said, this guy's a kafir. Why is he a kafir? Because he talks about Allah's light, and we are part of that light, and that's really confusing to us, so let's kill him. That's exactly what happens. They say he's a magician, we don't understand him. So they write to Salahuddin. Salahuddin gives an order to kill Sarawudi. His son Bahaduddin says, I listened to the guy, he's great. So he said, let's give him one chance, let's just do a debate now. Let's bring everybody you debate with him. They had a debate with him, but they had one question that was a trap. And I'll leave you with this. They asked him a question. Do you believe that Allah can create another prophet? What would you say to that? Yes or no? Yes? So, you believe that there will be another prophet after Prophet Muhammad? Is that what you said? That's exactly what Shahrawardin said. He said, I believe that Allah could create another prophet, but He's not going to. Allah has the ability to create another, but He's not going to. They said, that's it. You don't believe in Islam, you believe in another prophet, you're a kafir. The problem is that if he said no, they say Allah, see, he says that Allah is not able to create a prophet, kill him either way. Well, they were so kind to him as to say, okay, you're going to die, but because you're so good, 35 years old, we're going to allow you to choose how to die. And his choice was, let me starve to death so I meet Allah with an empty stomach, and that's how he did it. So these guys had absolutely no mercy on scholar, on imam, on believer, on descendant of the Prophet ﷺ. Why wouldn't their icons attack Fatima al-Zahra? That's what they got. Everything that happened to Fatima, and Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, and the Imams was from that attack on Fatima al-Zahra. هذا والحمد لله رب العالمين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Oh no, but I should this will be 6 hours. There you go. That's good.
صار 3 أيام مشي أبو علي اسمه